What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network for the best decks in standard format of the Pokemon trading card game in July 2022. Astral Radiance is the newest legal main set. The Pokemon Go set has come out, but it won't really be influencing my top 5 decks too much. Keep in mind that the set is out. There are some cards to consider for decks like Pokestop or maybe like Slaking V for Arceus decks, but overall the Pokemon Go set isn't too impactful to these decks that we'll be talking about today. Before we get into my best decks in the standard format for July, shout out to the sponsors of my channel: Dragon Shield Sleeves, PotownStore.com, the best place to get PTCGO codes, CardTrooperGames.com, where you can always reliably pre-order the newest products, Beast Coast Pokemon, a collaborative YouTube channel of Pokemon creators such as myself, and PokemonCard.io, the best place to view and share Pokemon deck lists. Starting at number 5, we're looking at Mewtwo V-Union Miltank Control. This is the deck that Sander Wojcik piloted to a top 4 finish at the North American International Championships 2022. The positives about this deck: it's built to beat the metagame as of NAIC 2022, and that metagame has not really changed much since. And it is also built to out-heal most decks, and Miltank walls the others. We'll talk about in a second exactly how the deck works. I'll break this deck down a little more than the others just because it's a little more complicated. The negatives of this deck: it can be fragile to set up and difficult to set up. Typically of control decks are, fragile and hard to set up, and then once you get through there, the end game is very, very strong, and that's the appeal of control decks. And it can be very difficult to pilot this perfectly. There's a lot of nuance to it. There's a lot of decisions that you have to make in the moment when you're playing a control deck that aren't decided preemptively. You have to kind of adapt to the situations with a control deck a lot more than you would with a typical kind of attacking deck that's trying to take prize cards. So this deck's main goal is to deck out the opponent. And here I just wanted to show you guys the main attack from the Mewtwo that you'll be wanting to use is Super Regeneration to heal 200 damage every turn. So you take a hit from something like an Arceus and you just Super Regeneration turn after turn after turn. There are some decks you can just straight up win against with Miltank if they can't get through the Miracle Body ability. And then we have this the energy removal like Crushing Hammer, Yveltal, Sydney. And then kind of the end game loop is just playing Silene and flipping whatever coins you can to get things back on top, and then you just Pal Pad Silene back into the deck, and then you Silene the Pal Pad back, and etc. and so on, while you're just using Super Regeneration. There's also a couple healing cards in the deck like Cook to help out if you need a little bit of extra healing on top of the Super Regeneration. And of course, here is the list that Sander played to the top 4 placement. The top 4 match was streamed if you want to watch it on the Pokemon TCG channel or the Pokemon YouTube channel. But yeah, so this is the list. They have the trekking shoes in there for a little bit of extra draw power. Snorlax is going to be the main draw engine though, with Gormandize. Just sit the Snorlax out in the active, draw up to 7. And just do that a few times until you're ready to actually get the Mewtwo V-Union into play. You have to sometimes fetch the pieces out of the prizes with Peonia, then discard the pieces, then they go onto the board. So that's a process in and of itself. But yeah, there's the list. Difficult to play, rewarding though to play it very well. Number 4 is going to be Arceus VSTAR Flying Pikachu. This is the deck that Azul won the North American International Championships with. The positives about this deck: the type coverage against Palkia V-Star. You have a lightning Pokemon that has 310 HP, doing 160. You're one-shotting Palkia V-Star. That's really good. You can counter Mew with Marnie Path, and also the 1/1 Crobat VMAX that's in the deck to hit for weakness. The deck is reasonably consistent. You know, you're an Arceus deck, so as long as you get that Starbirth turn 2, you're pretty good to go. And you have answers to Miltank with Max Balloon. It doesn't let the Miltank hit you. And then Azul's list specifically was playing Phoebe, so you can get through the Miltank with that as well. Um, I'm sorry, you can't. Yeah, we'll touch on Phoebe in a moment. The negatives of the deck: it can struggle against other Arceus variants, like Arceus and Inteleon, because they can loop Charons. And then the good matchups aren't that good. Like the Palkia matchup, if you go second, you can still lose. You know, if you don't bench a Flying Pikachu V turn 1 going first, you can still lose. The Mew matchup is very far from perfect. It's winnable. It might even be slightly favored, but it's not perfect. And then the Arceus and Inteleon matchup is a little unfavored. So the matchup spread isn't perfect for this deck, but if this deck runs hot, it beats everything, I think. So, I was iffy if I should make this the third or fourth best deck, but I felt like it was the fourth best deck in my eyes. So let's take a look at the list now. So Phoebe, like I was mentioning, damage from your Pokemon VMAX's attacks isn't affected by any effects on the opponent's active Pokemon. So that allows you to go through the Miltank's ability with the Flying Pikachu VMAX, and then you can't get hit back by basic Pokemon. And this will also play the Pal Pad, so you can reuse that. But yeah, this is the list. You know, for Marnie as the 4 of draw supporter, because they're also playing 4 Path to the Peak. So Marnie Path is a very common thing you can combine with this deck. It's pretty reliable to be able to play Marnie and then play down a Path to the Peak as well. A 3-2 line of the Flying Pikachu VMAX to make those Flying Pikachu Vs easier to drop on turn 1. Like I was mentioning, those are the ways that you can lose to Palkia if you just don't get a Flying Pikachu V down. So the list, I think, is built pretty much as consistently as it can be. This did win NAIC, so maybe it deserves to be higher than number 4. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Number 3 is going to be Mew VMAX Genesect. Mew VMAX Genesect is very aggressive. It can start knocking out Pokemon on turn 1. It has a very high damage output, and it can consistently put out 210 damage plus for many turns. And it can even hit over 300, especially with Melodious Echo from Meloetta. And it's a very consistent deck as well. It becomes inconsistent, however, if the opponent is playing Path to the Peak. Multiple Path to the Peaks happening back to back can really stick Mew eventually. You know, maybe they have the Stadium Bump once or they have the Pumpkaboo once, but it's hard for them to have it every single time a path comes into play. So Mew is moderately targeted. I'd say most players are going to test against Mew. They'll understand the Mew matchup somewhat, and a lot of players will also tech for the Mew matchup. And then Mew is weak against single prize decks like Regigigas. That's going to be a really, really bad matchup for Mew. And this is the highest placing Mew list from NAIC. I believe it was 18th place. Mew lists have not really innovated much. Some people play the trekking shoes instead of Rotom Phone, like you see here. Some people opt to not play Oricorio, which I think Oricorio is very good. So I would play Oricorio personally, but this was the highest placing Mew VMAX list from NAIC. So that was the one I chose to feature today. Number 2 is Arceus Inteleon. The positives: Arceus Inteleon is very consistent once it is set up. If you make it past turn 1 with Arceus Inteleon, you're in for a good time, in my opinion. You know, if you can get Arceus V and an energy turn 1, you're set. It can tank and heal efficiently, with Big Charm giving it 310 HP, and then Charon's Care picking it up and just sending out the next Arceus. It has a great matchup spread, and it has the potential to beat practically anything. That doesn't mean that it does beat everything, but it can beat pretty much anything. The negatives for AI, it's prone to awkward turn one hands. Even the games where you get out of them, it's like the struggle, a lot of the knowledge of Arceus and Inteleon is knowing how to make those turn one hands work. And then also it's weak to Jolteon memory capsule decks like Arceus Malamar VMAX with memory capsule. Those are less common right now, but it's still worth noting that those can shut it down pretty hard. This is the top 8 list that Steven Varesco played and placed top 8 at NAIC. I also played this exact 60, did not place as well. I was somewhere in top 256. The double Palpad, double Ordinary Rod allows you to essentially play 6 Charons in one game. The Starmie V is good against Blissey, and it can be good against a Ralladon, not that you really need it because that's a good matchup anyway. But the Starmie V, if Blissey decks are less popular now and there's not a lot of decks that are just piling energy onto their board, then Starmie V can probably be cut moving forward. But other than that, this list is very good at what it does. It does auto lose to Regigigas, which was fine for pretty much everybody that played this deck at NAIC since we cut the Manaphy and the Dunsparce. Because Regigigas was not that popular and it wasn't being played by a lot of great players. Of course, depending on your local metagames or online events, whatever you're entering, the metagame can change. So maybe you would cut like the Starmie plus another card for the Manaphy Dunsparce to be back in, and then take your favorite matchup to Regigigas again. And lastly, the number 1 deck is Palkia VSTAR Inteleon. It has high damage output. It's easy to chain attacks with this deck. The deck list and strategies are adaptable, and the deck, the archetype itself, is reliable and consistent. I think this deck in every way is the number 1 deck of the format. It is heavily targeted since it is so good and so popular, but that's okay because it's a very strong deck. It can be swept by a large lightning type attacker, like I talked about with Flying Pikachu VMAX, but again, you can even beat that sometimes. And it's difficult to play it 100% perfect because there's a lot of options with this deck between Shady Dealings and when to Star Portal and concealed cards with Greninja and when to attack with Greninja. So there are a lot of options and there's a lot of ways you can go wrong with the deck while you're piloting it. But it still, I would say, has a pretty good performance rate. Even if you're not playing 100% perfectly, the deck is still really strong. So here is Isaiah Bradner's second place NAIC list with the 3-3 Palkia and the 3 Sobble notably, but playing the Hisuian Heavy Ball, making that not too much of an issue. The full 4 Battle VIP pass, going with the 4 Cross Switcher, and a pretty light supporter lineup of 4 Irida, and then 1 Melanie, 1 Boss, 1 Marnie, 1 Roxanne. Really going into that Irida package, the Cross Switcher plan, not using a lot of supporters other than Irida. And those are going to be my top 5 decks. Those are the best decks in standard format right now, according to me, according to performances, according to the results. So let me know what you agree or disagree with in the comments down below. And thank you so much for watching today on Celio's Network. I'll see you next time.